Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. Amid all the budget news this week were some pretty important cabinet confirmations for Governor Josh Shapiro, and some may argue that few rise above the importance of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. As of the taping of this podcast, Al Schmidt has officially taken office, where he will oversee, among other things, election administration. Anthony, did this nomination come with much hesitance in the Senate, given our turbulent election history as of late?
Yes and no. On the one hand, he did get through with a 10-1 vote within the Senate State Government Committee. Senator Doug Mastriano was the only one to vote no on his nomination. So that was relatively smooth. However, this was 3 hearings it required Schmidt to actually get through the State Government Committee here. So there were, each of these hearings were very much focused on, things like mail-in ballots, election integrity, this sort of thing. So generally, you don't necessarily see that many confirmation hearings being held. Schmidt's wasn't an exception. I think at least when we're looking at this, Schmidt is a former Republican official in the Philadelphia City Commissioner's office, basically overseeing the elections there. Senator Chris Dush, who is the Republican chair of the committee, summarized his views as, "I will be voting to recommend you today. However, my vote is offered with the trust that you have assured this committee you will faithfully discharge the duties to the Commonwealth to make sure elections are administered in a nonpartisan and unbiased manner." So Dush supported Schmidt, but he did have some hesitancy here. A lot of this comes from how he's clashed with prior secretaries over essentially how state law should be interpreted. Dush has also been very outspoken about being concerned of the security or integrity of mail-in ballots, especially drop boxes, and how vulnerable they could be to ballot harvesting, which is essentially people stuffing ballots in there, especially if they're unmonitored or if they're open 24 hours. So, there's still, I would not expect Schmidt's tenure to be completely smooth, and for all his relationships with the Republican Senate to be smooth. But there's at least some level of trust here. And Schmidt, in his testimony, kind of emphasized his willingness to work with the Senate on these issues. He said, "I'm willing to examine anything that improves voter access and improves election integrity." So how long this goodwill will last is an open question. But he did finally make it through the gauntlet here.
So for listeners to recap, Schmidt certainly has a very difficult task ahead of him. We've gone through in Pennsylvania here, I want to say 4 or 5 acting secretaries ever since a former Kathy Bookvar, the secretary who was in office during the 2020 elections, resigned after some major administrative errors within the department that were later blamed on a lot of disorganization and lacking structure within the department to make sure things were happening as they should be. So on top of this, the broader conversation around elections and our mail-in voting law, which was just recently upheld by a state court, there's been a lot of turmoil over elections in the last few years. And I think his history as a Republican might be a signal from the administration of kind of reaching across the aisle, trying to engender some trust here and to kind of smooth over what's been a very bumpy path to finding a Commonwealth secretary. He went through 3 committee hearings, but the final vote on the floor, we are aware of, did he face any resistance there?
Not quite. I mean, when you watch the hearing, Mastriano voted against him in this one, but did not comment or say anything. He also sort of emphasized, there's not as much disagreement here as some people might fear. There was talk about during the last election cycle when there were grants to county level election boards to fund elections. Many of those, or the majority of those, went to Democratic heavy counties. That now is prohibited thanks to Act 88 that was passed last year. So it should only be government funds, no third-party funds or non-government funds coming in. Schmidt was very complimentary of that change. He said anything related to election administration is better when you're spending public dollars. And thanks to Act 88, private dollars are no longer a concern. So, despite that no vote, I don't think there was as much tension as there could be or as there has been with previous acting secretaries.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.